Anna was a woman used to living with the basics. Raised in a humble neighborhood, she was proud of being a resilient and hardworking person. With 2 jobs and a 13-year-old son to look after, his days were intense. But his greatest pride was Pedro, an intelligent and polite boy who dreamed of being an engineer. Anna's life, despite being simple, had its moments of genuine happiness. The meals shared with her son, the frank conversations at night about the future and dreams were what kept her going. Pedro studied at a nearby public school and always excelled in science and mathematics subjects. He had an optimistic worldview. But he also knew his mother faced challenges. Anna's routine changed completely on a day that seemed like any other. She worked as an administrative assistant at a large company, and although her work was monotonous, she prided herself on being efficient. Anna never expected great things. He knew that his position would not guarantee him quick promotions, nor would he be close to the company's directors. However, something unusual happened that late afternoon. Carlos, the company's owner, a distant man who was always surrounded by an air of superiority, called her to a meeting. Anna had never exchanged more than formal greetings with him, so the invitation seemed strange. Carlos was known for his business success and troubled personal life. A man in his early 40s, always impeccable in his expensive suits, lived in a mansion in the city's most upscale neighborhood. He had recently separated from his ex-wife, Helena, an upper-class, snobbish woman known for her coldness. The separation between Carlos and Helena was widely discussed in conversation circles among company employees. It was a scandal that involved betrayal and disputes over their 14-year-old son, Lucas. But for Anna, all of this was distant. She remained aloof from the gossip, too busy with her own problems. Don't miss Anna and Pedro's inspiring journey. Sign up now to follow more stories like this and discover the power of resilience and dreams. When she entered Carlos' office, she was greeted with a discreet smile and a distant look. Carlos was direct and formal. After a few minutes of polite conversation, he made a proposal that left her disconcerted. He was organizing a big birthday party for his son Lucas and wanted to invite Anna and her son Pedro. The reason? Lucas and Pedro had become close at school, and, according to Carlos, Lucas didn't have many friends. Therefore, he would like Pedro to be present at the party, and he insisted that Anna also attend. Anna could barely hide her surprise. I didn't understand what was behind that unusual invitation. Why would Carlos, such a distant and powerful man, care about his son? Although there was the question of friendship between Lucas and Pedro, something made her hesitate. Accepting meant entering a world completely different from hers, a world of luxury and excess that she could barely imagine. She wondered how she would be received, especially since the party would take place in the mansion of Carlos' ex-wife, Helena, a woman who, according to rumors, would never accept someone from humble origins into her home. But faced with Carlos' insistently calm look, Anna felt pressured to accept. He explained that he wanted Lucas to feel comfortable, and that Pedro was one of the few people the boy trusted. As a result, Anna found herself faced with a dilemma. How to deny a direct request from her boss, even though the idea made her uncomfortable? Something about Carlos' insistence made her give in. Upon returning home, Anna was thoughtful. He told Pedro about the invitation, and as expected, he was excited. I had never been to such a luxurious party, much less a mansion. Pedro, like any boy his age, had no problem being in an environment different from his own. On the contrary, he was curious to see how the rich lived. For him, this was a unique opportunity. Anna, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling that something was out of place. She spent the next few days deep in thought. It was a mix of curiosity and apprehension. There was something disconcerting about the way Carlos had invited her, an almost cold formality, as if he was doing himself a favor more than them. What bothered her most was the prospect of meeting Helena, a woman she had heard a lot about, but had never met. According to rumors, Helena was an elitist woman, who did not easily accept people outside her social circle. Anna didn't remember ever feeling so insecure. The idea of entering the home of someone like Helena Knowing that she would be looked at from top to bottom filled her with discomfort. Even so, the desire to make Pedro happy was greater than any hesitation. He deserved this moment of happiness, and Ana didn't want to deprive him of it. He decided he would go, but with a heavy heart and a mind full of fears. The night before the party, Ana barely slept. He spent hours in front of his closet, looking at his simple clothes. I knew that anything I wore would look out of place on that occasion. It wasn't just about what to wear. It was about who she was. Ana felt inadequate, out of place in a world where money dictated the rules. She knew the eyes would be on her, assessing every movement, every detail of her appearance. But in the morning, when he saw Pedro's excitement, he put his worries aside. He was radiant, and Ana couldn't let her fears interfere with her son's happiness. On the day of the party, upon arriving at the entrance to the mansion, Ana was overcome by an even greater feeling of discomfort. The gate slowly opened, revealing a stunning property with impeccably manicured gardens and a house that looked like it came out of an architecture magazine. Ana's heart accelerated. She had never seen anything like it. Pedro, on the other hand, was dazzled. Her eyes shone when she saw the luxury around her, without noticing her mother's nervousness. Ana knew that, when crossing that gate, she would enter a world that was not hers. The feeling of not belonging to this environment was overwhelming. Everything there, from the perfectly pruned trees to the imposing facade of the mansion, exuded an unattainable richness. Deep down, she knew that, no matter how polite and discreet she was, she would always be seen as the humble woman who had been invited on Carlos's whim. Upon entering the mansion, Ana was immediately surrounded by curious looks. The environment was decorated with extreme luxury, and the people there looked like they had stepped out of a fashion show, with expensive clothes and refined gestures. Carlos' ex-wife, Helena, was among them, imposing in her posture, observing everything from afar. Ana avoided eye contact, but she felt the heavy judgmental gazes, as if her every step was being analyzed. Inside the party, while Pedro was having fun with Lucas and other young people, Ana tried to remain as discreet as possible. She felt like an intruder, someone who shouldn't be there. But no matter how much he tried to hide in a corner, his presence was noticed. The looks continued, and the conversations around her carried an air of superficiality that made her even more uncomfortable. As the hours passed, Ana's feeling of displacement intensified. Being at that party was like living in a parallel world, where luxury and opulence were norms and not exceptions. Helena's mansion was grand in an almost intimidating way, with its marble columns, giant chandeliers, and works of art scattered throughout every corner. The conversations around them revolved around international travel, investments, and sophisticated dinners, topics so far from Ana's reality that she felt invisible, as if she wasn't part of it. While Pedro mingled with the children and teenagers, laughing and playing without caring about social differences, Ana remained isolated, observing everything from afar. Her son, at least for a brief moment, was experiencing a life she could never provide. It comforted her and, at the same time, hurt her. She wanted Pedro to be happy, but she couldn't ignore the sadness of knowing that he would soon return to the modest reality of his home. That party was a glimpse into a world he would probably never have access to again. Carlos moved around the party with his usual confidence, greeting guests with courteous smiles and pleasant conversations. Every now and then, his eyes met Ana's, but he didn't come closer. She noticed that he kept a calculated distance, perhaps because he was aware that her presence there would not be welcomed by Helena and her friends. This behavior made her uncomfortable, as if she was being tolerated only out of convenience. Helena, in turn, was the perfect image of the rich and controlling housewife. She moved around the party with an air of superiority, always surrounded by a group of equally elegant friends. His eyes roamed the room as if he were assessing every detail, and Ana couldn't help but feel like she was under constant scrutiny. Although Helena hadn't said a word to her, the contempt was evident in the way their gazes briefly met, only for Helena to look away in disdain. Ana tried to remain firm, but the growing tension made her question her decision to attend the party. While the guests laughed and talked excitedly, she remained silent, feeling small in the face of so much grandeur. What bothered her most was the fact that, no matter how much she tried to be discreet, her presence was noticed. There was a certain discomfort in the air whenever someone passed by, as if their mere existence in that space disturbed the harmony of that elitist world. Despite everything, Anna tried to hide her discomfort. She knew Pedro was having fun, and that stopped her from just leaving. Still, he couldn't help the thoughts that invaded his mind. Why had Carlos been so insistent that she and Pedro attend? Did he really care about the boys' friendship, or was there another hidden motive behind his apparent kindness? These doubts began to consume Anna, but she had no answers. Peter, on the other hand, was amazed by everything. He and Lucas were inseparable, sharing laughs and jokes as if they were old friends. For Pedro, the party was a dream come true, something he could never imagine. With each new discovery, the gigantic pool, the state-of-the-art games, the exotic foods, he became more excited. The contrast between Pedro's innocent joy and Anna's growing discomfort was painful, but she did her best to hide her feelings, not wanting to ruin her son's moment. The party continued, and Anna tried to distract herself, observing the luxury around her and imagining what it would be like to live in that world. However, I couldn't shake the weight of being out of place. He felt that at any moment someone could question his presence there. This feeling of inadequacy increased when Helena finally approached. Without hesitation, Helena stopped next to Anna, her cold smile framed by an expression of false cordiality. After a few seconds of awkward silence, she began to speak. The words that came out of his mouth were polite, but they carried a tone of undeniable superiority. Helena didn't bother to hide the disdain she felt for Anna being there. Although the speech was formal and courteous, the subtext was clear. Anna did not belong there. Helena spoke about the party, about Lucas, and even about Pedro, but always with a distant air, as if she were talking about something below her consideration. She praised Lucas for being a good son, but was careful in her choice of words when she mentioned Pedro, subtly suggesting that he was a good influence within his limitations. Anna swallowed the words she wanted to say. He knew there was no room for confrontation at that moment. He couldn't ruin Pedro's night, nor risk his professional relationship with Carlos. Helena was a woman who knew how to destabilize someone without raising her voice. The conversation ended abruptly, with Helena walking away to talk to other guests. Anna remained there, motionless, feeling even smaller than before. Those few words had made clear what she already knew. For Helena and the people of that world, she would never be more than a stranger. The fact that there was an anomaly, a curiosity that would soon be forgotten. But for Anna, it was a painful reminder of the invisible barriers that separated her from this universe. As the night progressed, Anna began to think about what returning to her reality would be like. The grandeur of that party was beginning to seem surreal, as if it were something that would soon disappear when she returned to her simple daily life. As he watched Pedro laugh alongside Lucas, his heart sank. He knew that soon, that joy would be just a memory, and that they would return to the real world, where difficulties would continue to exist. Before the party ended, Carlos finally approached Anna. He greeted her with his usual cordiality and asked if she and Pedro were having fun. The conversation was brief, almost mechanical, and Anna noticed that, although Carlos tried to be friendly, there was an obvious distance. He didn't delve into any topic, didn't ask personal questions, just thanked them for their presence, and went on his way. Anna knew that night would be etched in her memory, not for the reasons she would have liked, but for the lessons she had learned about her place in the world. Even in an environment where she was supposed to be a guest, she felt like an intruder. At that party, surrounded by people who barely noticed her or looked at her with disdain, Anna realized that some barriers are almost impossible to overcome. The party was coming to an end, and Anna asked Pedro to leave. He, still radiant, did not want to leave the mansion. He wanted to continue exploring that world that, for him, was full of new possibilities. But Anna, tired and emotionally exhausted, knew it was time to leave. The way back would be long, not just in distance, but in meaning. The return to reality would be inevitable. And despite all the grandeur of that night, Ana knew that her life would not change after that event. As she and Pedro walked back home, the lights of the mansion were left behind, and the weight of reality settled back on their shoulders. When Ana and Pedro left the party, an uncomfortable silence fell between the two. Pedro, still enchanted by everything he had experienced, talked excitedly about Lucas, the mansion, and all the things he had seen. But Ana, on the other hand, found herself absorbed in her thoughts, with a heavy heart. Helen's words still echoed in his mind. No matter how much she tried to hide her discomfort, she couldn't help but feel diminished. That night, instead of being a moment of happiness for Pedro, had turned into a bitter memory for her. The next day, Ana returned to her routine, but something had changed. The discomfort from the previous night persisted, mixed with a feeling of helplessness. What disturbed her most was Carlos' insistence on staying in touch. A few days after the party, he started looking for her more often. First, through short emails about work matters, which soon evolved into quick conversations in his office. Ana realized that there was something strange in her approach. Carlos, normally so reserved, now seemed to be trying hard to establish a connection. But no matter how polite he was, Ana couldn't ignore the feeling that there was something behind his kindness. Pedro, in turn, continued his friendship with Lucas. They saw each other often, and this pleased Ana, as she saw that her son was happy. However, with each new meeting, the memory of the party and the veiled humiliation he felt in Helena's presence came back to the surface. She wondered what Carlos really wanted when he insisted on keeping Pedro and Lucas close. It was hard to believe that someone like him, with so many responsibilities and such a different lifestyle, could genuinely care about the friendship between the two boys. One afternoon, while Ana was working, Carlos unexpectedly appeared in her office. He closed the door behind him, with a different, more intense look. The tone of voice he used at that moment was not that of a boss speaking to an employee. Carlos approached and, in a tone that mixed familiarity and a dose of authority, began talking about the party, mentioning how successful it had been and how Lucas had had fun with Pedro. But then the conversation took an unexpected turn. Carlos hinted that now that Pedro and Lucas were so close, he would like to keep that relationship strong. To do this, he suggested that Ana accept a gift from him, something that, according to him, would make her life easier. A gift that would ensure that Pedro could continue to take advantage of the opportunities that Lucas had. Carlos' proposal seemed, at first glance, like a generous gesture, but Ana soon realized what was really happening. The offer was not simply disinterested help. There was a built-in price. Ana felt betrayed and offended. The way Carlos approached her, as if she were someone he could buy with gifts and favors, made her realize the true nature of the relationship he wanted to establish. The friendship between Pedro and Lucas had just been an excuse for Carlos to get closer to Ana in a more personal way. And now, he made it clear that he expected something in return. She stood up immediately, interrupting him mid-sentence. The feeling of humiliation took over his chest. Ana didn't need gifts. She didn't want favors. His pride and his dignity were all he had. Although her life was difficult, she had never allowed anyone to treat her as someone inferior. Carlos, with all his money and power, thought he could manipulate people like her, as if they were pieces in his game. Carlos, seeing Ana's reaction, tried to hide his embarrassment, backtracking on his words, but the damage was already done, and, with a trembling voice, thanked him for the offer, but was firm in refusing. She said that she and Pedro lived well with what they had, and that they didn't need anything else. The anger he felt was accompanied by deep disgust. Carlos tried to remedy the situation, saying that he had misunderstood, that he had no intention of offending her. But Ana no longer wanted to hear his justifications. When Carlos left the room, Ana sat at her desk, her hands shaking. Tears of frustration and indignation welled up in his eyes. She thought about Pedro, about how disappointed he would be if he knew what had happened. How could she tell him that her friendship with Lucas was just a tool for Carlos to try to get close to her in such a disrespectful way? The reality was bitter, and Anna didn't know how to deal with it. The days that followed were difficult. Anna began to avoid Carlos, keeping her interactions with him strictly professional. Whenever Peter mentioned Luke, his heart sank. She didn't want to destroy her son's happiness, but she knew she needed to protect Pedro from this situation. He was too young to understand the layers of manipulation that were being thrown at them. However, Anna also knew that she could not allow this friendship to continue without clarifying everything. It was on a quiet night, during dinner, that Anna decided to tell Pedro the truth. She chose her words carefully, trying not to hurt the boy. He explained that although Lucas was a good friend, their relationship could not continue as before. Pedro, initially confused, listened in silence. When Anna finished, the boy's eyes were full of tears. He didn't understand why his and Lucas' friendship needed to end over something he couldn't control. Anna felt her heart break. I knew I was taking something precious from Pedro, but I also knew I needed to be honest. Carlos had crossed a line, and she couldn't risk the integrity of her family. Pedro, although sad, seemed to understand. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. He just accepted his mother's decision, even with a tightness in his chest. The following week, Pedro and Lucas had one last conversation, and the end of their friendship was painful for both. Lucas didn't fully understand why, and Pedro, without revealing the details, just said that things had changed. The boys said goodbye bitterly, with a mixture of sadness and confusion. Anna, in turn, felt relief mixed with deep sadness. I knew I had done the right thing, but that didn't make things any easier. The experience with Carlos and Helena had left marks on his soul, but it had also taught him valuable lessons. The price of trying to adapt to a world that wasn't hers was too high, and Anna knew that, in the end, her place was at Pedro's side, in his simple but dignified life. Reality had returned with force, and although the pain was still present, Anna knew that, from now on, she and Pedro would remain firm, as they always had been. The days that followed the end of the friendship between Pedro and Lucas were silent and introspective for Anna. Pedro, normally so happy and outgoing, was quieter, absorbing the sudden change in his life. For Anna, it was painful to see her son go through this disappointment, even though she knew she had made the right choice. The feeling of having taken something precious from Pedro accompanied her. The awareness that the world of luxury and excess was unattainable for them was not new. But now, this reality had become more raw. Peter still occasionally asked about Luke, but as time passed, the questions became less frequent. He returned to focusing on school, extracurricular activities, and his studies. But there was a shadow of forced maturity in his behavior. He had understood early on that not all friendships are built on solid foundations, and that the world can be unfair and complex. Anna felt a mix of pride and sadness seeing her son dealing with these feelings, so young and, at the same time, so aware. For Anna, the focus now was on rebuilding her life within the routine she had always known. What had happened at the party, Helena's words, Carlos' attempt to manipulate her, all of this had left a mark on her soul. But Anna was a strong, resilient woman, and she knew that the most important thing was to keep her integrity intact. Despite the difficulties she faced, she was proud of the life she had built for herself and Pedro, even if that life was far from the glamour that many considered ideal. Work at the company continued, but the relationship between Anna and Carlos was never the same. He, realizing the mistake he had made, avoided Anna whenever possible. When interaction was inevitable, their conversations were short and strictly professional. Anna, in turn, maintained a polite but distant posture. She never allowed herself to be dragged back into any situation that could repeat what happened. She knew that the respect she had for herself was non-negotiable. Over time, Carlos stopped being a concern, and Anna was able to turn her attention to other priorities. Pedro continued to excel in school, and she did her best to encourage him to follow his dreams. Even with financial limitations, Ana went to great lengths to give Pedro the support he needed in his education. She knew that his future depended on her dedication, and Pedro, in turn, recognized his mother's sacrifices. A few months later, while Ana was organizing the house one late afternoon, Pedro arrived home from school and announced that he had been chosen to represent the class in a science competition. The news brought a glow of joy to their routine. Pedro, excited and full of expectations, told every detail about the project he had developed with so much effort. Ana, seeing the happiness in her son's eyes, realized that the difficult phase had passed. Pedro had overcome his disappointment with Lucas's friendship and was building new memories, focused on what really mattered. The competition was a success, and Pedro won first place. His victory was a reflection of all the effort they both put in daily to achieve something greater. The award, although simple, was celebrated with enthusiasm by Ana and Pedro. There was no glamour, no luxurious parties, just the genuine happiness of knowing they were heading down the right path. Ana, that night, sat on her bed and reflected on everything that had happened since Carlos' invitation to the party. In many ways, that experience had been transformative, not just for her, but for Pedro as well. They had experienced what it was like to be in a world that didn't belong to them, and this experience made them value the life they had even more. There was no luxury, but there was honesty. There were no excesses, but there was love. And in the end, that was what really mattered. The birthday party at Helena's mansion, which had once seemed so grand and unattainable, was now just a distant memory, a chapter in their lives that, although remarkable, did not define who they were. The true wealth, Ana knew, was in the small daily victories, in the unconditional love she shared with Pedro, and in the certainty that they were following a path based on non-negotiable values and principles. As the months passed, the distance between them and Carlos and Helena's world became increasingly evident. Pedro rarely talked about Lucas, and Ana almost never thought about Carlos. Life continued in its natural course, and the days became once again focused on the small achievements of the routine. Ana, despite all the challenges, felt a growing inner peace. She had faced a difficult situation, she had made difficult choices, but she was at peace with herself. What remained in the end was the conviction that everything she needed was within her reach. There were no mansions, parties, or riches, but there was a home, a beloved son, and the certainty that, together, they would face the future, with all its uncertainties, with their heads held high. Life, Ana realized, is made up of simple moments and courageous decisions. And although choices are not always easy, they are what define us. Ana and Pedro, alongside their limitations and dreams, were rich in a way that Carlos and Helena could never understand.